Hi there, my name is John Park and welcome to this tutorial. In today's demonstration, I'm going to be sharing my techniques and thought process for developing an image. Let's get started. Now, the way I like to think about this is I want to kind of analyze the shape. So let's just go ahead and kind of break down our image here, but I want to analyze the shape before I kind of go into the painting because it's important for us to understand what we're looking at before we paint everything. Painting is all about simplifying. It's all about kind of reading things in graphic shapes. So if you look here, this is kind of our ground plane here. A very simple kind of shape down here. And then for the background, this is our mountain shape. And then the mountain shape is, if you notice, there's like a big triangle shape here. It kind of does this. And then there's these other shapes that kind of basically arc down. And that's basically what I want to draw. Now I know this seems really easy, but it honestly is that easy. So when you break down the shapes, that's going to be the number one thing. Number one is shapes. Number two is going to be color. And number three is going to be texture and detail. So this is something that we're going to focus on at the very, very end. But it's not until we have number one and two that we're going to worry about texture and color. We're not going to worry about this until we have number one and two established. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the dominant color that I see in this scene is actually this orange tone, and we're gonna actually color pick because I'm not trying to use my own observation and try to figure out the color. I'm gonna use what's here, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and just map out this entire canvas, and I'm gonna put a big orange. And you'll notice that there's actually a really nice band of red, orange, and blue. And that's what I want to paint. I want to paint that red, orange, and blue. And I'm just using like a one of my rake brushes here. And you guys can use whatever brushes you want, but I basically have this entire series. Go ahead and kind of mess around with it. But I like to just use like a soft rake brush so I can get kind of these nice colors. And that's all I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to create these bands of colors. I don't really care, whether they are perfectly accurate or not. I just want these bands of color so that I can kind of replicate what's going to happen next. So once you have kind of these nice bands of color, the next thing I'm going to do is I want to establish my shapes. So let's go ahead and establish the shapes here. And I'm going to draw in my shapes here, and I'm going to basically sketch in. Remember, we're following that same principle. And I'm doing this on a separate layer because I don't want, I want to be able to edit this so that anytime I mess up, I can go, oh shoot, this mountain needs to be a lot larger. You know, the shape needs to be bigger. And then I can go like this. And then I basically have something kind of placed in for my sky. And you can already see that it kind of easily maps out our shape here. And I can go in here and I can start to really subtly block out the details of our mountain ridge here. And then let's see here. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I want to block out my I actually want to start blocking out some of the shadows here. So I'm going to create a layer underneath this. And then on this layer, I'm going to start blocking out some of my shadow shapes. And all I'm really thinking about is basically just the pure graphic shape design. That's all I really care about. I'm trying to think about just blocking this stuff out into almost 100% flat graphic shapes. Now, if this is a little tricky and you guys are having a little bit of a hard time, don't worry about it. It takes a little while getting used to you know, this process and also the brushes. You know, when I don't paint like this for a while, it takes me about one or two, like it takes me a few paintings to kind of get used to it. So don't feel bad if it's taking a little longer than you expected. And all I really want to do is I want to try to kind of mask out just some of these shapes, and I want to simplify this stuff here. And I'm just thinking about shape design, just kind of like what each mark could represent, whether it's like a ridge or kind of like a detail on a mountain face. And then what's great here is actually I can start to block in some of the darker values by locking my layer here and start painting in just some of these darker shapes. And I'm treating everything as a shape because I don't want to go too detailed. I just want to kind of get the overall feeling of kind of like the textures and things like that. And these studies are relatively easy because we have this photo reference. So all I'm really doing is I'm trying to do the simple version of what you see here. Now notice how there's like this gesture in the band. Now I'm gonna make that modification on this layer. I can actually just paint a better gesture of color, and I can do something like that so that we can get a much more prettier um, color and tone and texture to kind of move through. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to create just another tone here. I'm going to try to redo all this. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to do another band of color here, just really softly. I'm going to put this on darken so I don't affect the blues. And I just want to do a really light version. And I just want to let it kind of slowly glaze across. And I'll do this mountain back here. You know, we'll just add just a little bit of that color back there. And notice how everything is here, because when I paint over here, you can't see it because it's covered by this sky layer. You see that? Alright, now let's go ahead and do basically the shapes for the bottom here. I'm not going to add any details yet. I want to add in just a little bit more information down here below. And what I see here is a nice orange, which what we have. We have this orange down here. But what's really nice is the fact that you have kind of this distinct shape. So I actually want to put in, I'm going to start to kind of put in like my own gesture here. I'm going to say like maybe what if we have kind of this nice little ridge here where these trees kind of sit up on top. But I want you guys to kind of start planning out maybe where these plants would sit compositionally. And that's kind of what I'm blocking out here, is I'm trying to block out the shapes here. Now this isn't, again, I don't want you guys to feel you have to be a slave to the photo. If you want to manipulate or change the shape or do something else, please do that, because at the end of the day, this is your painting and you can do whatever you want. All I want you guys to do is have fun and also learn, learn about the process. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'll paint in maybe these shapes too. But notice I'm not gonna paint them too large. I want to actually kind of play with a little bit of a composition here where these shapes are a lot more smaller. And again, you'll look at the way I'm color picking. I'm just trying to block out shapes here and think about just these patterns. And I'm not too worried about detail. I just want kind of these nice volumes of shapes. And I'm gonna create another layer back here just for the background because I feel that I want just a little bit of a mid ground here of shapes, and so that's kind of where I'm gonna add in maybe just another layer of plants here, kind of what you see right there. But treat everything as a shape. That's the one thing that I learned from, you know, my teachers who have taught me painting is treat everything as a simple basic shape. Okay. Now art can be kind of taught and learned in so many different ways. Um, so I mean, whatever works for you. If you guys find another method that works better, you know, definitely go with that. But this is something that I learned that has worked for me over the years. Um, and it's just something that I like to always practice. It's just really good shapes. And it starts off relatively simple, where you know we're just thinking about the shapes and color, and I'm not thinking about too many details. I'm just thinking of, you know, what all this stuff could be, like, you know, whether it's a tree or bush or something like that. But as it gets more and more complex, then that's when you're going to start seeing a lot more detail. But for now, like, just think about, just always remember easy shapes first and then detail. So this is the thing. Run colors and shapes. That's all it is. Colors and shapes first before detail. Okay. In the background here, I basically want a little bit of texture. Now the way I'm going to handle that is going to be a little different. I'm going to use I'm thinking about using like a scatter brush, like a square dot brush, and I'm going to pick maybe like a dark red and do something like this. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want to show that there's maybe a lot of plants back here, and that's all I'm really using it for, is to show that there's a cluster of plants way back here. And that's all I really want to do, is just kind of create a little sense of perspective and depth by using that. And you know, you can use different colors, but again, it's supposed to be relatively simple back here. Now, since this area here is a lot more closer to us and is probably a lot more clear, I'm gonna go ahead and start adding a little bit more detail to this. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little, add a little bit of detail here, and then this is where, you know, I'm just gonna create just a bit more texture, some noise, some more just overall detail. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and pick these colors. And again, we can probably go in here and refine a lot of these shapes to be a lot more exact. So the reason why this is good for concept art is you need to understand how to paint to do these types of studies before you do your own images, because if you don't know how to do this on a basic level like this, it's going to be really tricky to do it for your own concept art. I'll say you do not want to try to do complex brushwork on your concept paintings if you don't know how to do this kind of stuff yet. Ooh, I haven't painted like this in a while, and I feel so rusty. I feel like I don't know how to do this anymore. You'll feel that too. Like when you guys get started on this, and you know when you do your first couple, you're like, oh yeah, this is I'm getting the hang of this. And then once you stop, you're you kind of forget like how to paint. I always feel that way. Like when I stop painting for a little while, and I work on, you know, 3D or photo bashing or something else, I feel like I don't know how to do this anymore. So it always takes a while to kind of get into the momentum, and then once you do, it's really fast. I want everybody to get really comfortable with the idea of just the process, you know, and understanding how to simplify, how to make really clear choices. Because when you know how to simplify, you'll know how to paint better and more effectively. So if you guys are learning how to paint, you know, be sure to look at not only what I'm doing, but also look at what you know, these other masters, like what they've established, what they know, because they bring so much knowledge, and they also bring so much technique and skill to just painting. Now, painting is different from design. I want you guys to know that it's a completely different muscle. You know, there's some similarities here and there, but then in general, it is a different act. And the reason why I personally think it's a different act is because the focus and the emphasis is so different. It requires a different muscle, a different sensibility. I think painting, it requires you to be very sensitive about color, light, and shapes, composition, anything that is purely about the final visual in the product. And then as we're design requires you to be, you know, research heavy. You gotta just explore, and you have to know what it is that you're trying to create. That's kind of what design is about. But it's like, you know, you need both. One cannot live without the other, truly. And the reason why, I mean, I like to practice both because there's kind of an appreciation for the two different disciplines in painting and drawing, or painting and designing, because what you learn in painting you can easily apply into your designs, you know, once you understand the two different disciplines. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding a little bit more detail and a bit more fidelity to this stuff. So I'm gonna start kind of pulling out maybe some of these shapes here. Okay. And you know, if we want to add some of these little textures, what I like to do is I like to use a texture brush and select kind of like a dark value here, and I'll just kind of sprinkle that on top, just like this. I'll probably put that on darken so that I don't mess up my textures. And if it gets a little too noisy, then I'll use my texture eraser and just kind of edit it out. But then it's a great way to kind of create the same kind of texture that exists here. And I'm going to do the same thing here, where I'm going to create the same texture using this dark blue, just for the bush lines here. And you just kind of want to stamp here and there, but this is kind of the general idea. Okay, so once you have this, I like to do a little bit of editing on the sky. This is my sky layer, and I want to add maybe just a little bit of like a yellow tone, just so I can get some like color vibration. And what that is just a little complementary color just in the sky. And that's all this is. Like, I just want a little bit of color variety here, so it's not just flat and blue. And then what I'll do here is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna copy this, and let's do just another copy merge. And I'm gonna introduce you guys to the mixer brush. And the mixer brush is actually on the brush menu. If you go here and you hold on to it, and you're gonna see mixer brush at the very bottom. Mixer brush. So the nice thing about the mixer brush is I have this set here, but I like to use Cool 1 and Cool 2. Okay. What you do is it's kind of like a cup, like I guess like a smudge and a clone stamp tool. What you do is you select an area and then you paint this color. So what's cool about it is, I'm gonna lock this down, but you can select an area here and you can paint, and you can get kind of this mixture of color. So that's kind of the beauty of mixer brush. Now, one thing you could do to enhance it even more is I like to go to sample all layers, and I'll sample the colors here and I'll put it into my painting. You see that? So that way, if you weren't able to capture some of these colors, now you can capture it using the mixer brush. And that's kind of the cool part about this technique, is there's like all this weird color combinations that come out of it. And I'll even pick colors here just just because sometimes if my colors here are very boring, so I'll pick these colors here and I'll just kind of put them in to our painting. And even if I want a little bit of color here, I'll like color pick this and I'll mark it onto our mountain here just to get a little bit of that this interesting variety. It's a really nice way to introduce just color dynamics and just blending and stuff. There's a lot of artists that do this technique, and I find this to be very, very helpful, especially when you want just more color complexity. Try to look up maybe fireside mountain, or let me see, fireside mountain, or sometimes I like to look up overcast mountain. But it won't always, you won't always find the best stuff, but then you'll find one or two images that are good enough, and then they'll kind of take you to another area. It's like stuff like this. This is what you want. Make sure when you guys find photos, you don't find anything that's too post-processy. You want things that kind of look a little natural. Like this is actually really nice. This has a nice like read. You just want to make sure it doesn't look flat. Like make sure the photo looks interesting. Like don't pick photos that are like this. Okay, this gets a little bit flat. But pick photos like this that are really graphic and really pretty. Like this. This is what I like to look at. Also, anything in Iceland is awesome too. Like you'll find really, really beautiful landscapes here. And just try to spend some time, because it's not gonna be like, the thing about the internet is there's a lot of bad stuff, so you have to spend a lot of time gathering good references. Okay, cool. All right, let's go to the next portion. When you're learning, you need to have photo reference because you're learning. You know what I mean? Only when you're really, really comfortable do you not use photos. But that just means you're using your visual library. Does that make sense? I think we like to see artwork that's done as if it's a magic trick, but we don't want to see how the magic trick is done. Does that make sense? And it's not bad to try to make things up, in your own from your own memory, or try to make things up from your own creativity. I think everyone should try, but I think when you're learning, it's gonna be very difficult because when you're learning, you have no experience. So when you have no experience, um, it's almost really hard to know if you're doing it right. So that's why for me, um, when I'm learning how to paint, I like to use photo reference so that I know exactly where I'm going or what I'm doing. And the thing about this is it's all about just understanding how to paint and getting really comfortable with painting. It's not about, what we're doing right now. It's not about putting in your portfolio and calling it and saying, oh, this is original. There's nothing original about this. We are literally studying. We are students studying. Okay, so you're trying to get a better sense of how to do this more confidently and more comfortably. You know. Now, at some point, if you guys want to challenge yourself, this is where you can start to kind of come up with your own composition, so that you're not completely reliant on the photograph. And so when you do this, you're kind of making decisions that are a lot more creative, but you're still using photo reference to kind of help you figure out, you know, just subtle color variations and things like that. Water is kind of the same thing as grass. It's a lot of texture. What you want to do is you want to simplify it with just one simple brush stroke, and then only pull out just a little bit of information here and there. You'll also learn more about um, what to do with certain paintings. Like the more you practice, the more you'll know like what to avoid or what to push, because you can't necessarily plan everything out in a painting when it's your first time. You have to kind of try things out, make mistakes, and then kind of go one painting at a time. Each painting will teach you a different lesson. That was something I remember. there's a famous painter named Richard Schmid, who's one of my favorite painters. If you guys don't know who Richard Schmid is, definitely look up Richard Schmid. Richard Schmid is amazing, but he also says something very similar, where he says every painting that you do will teach you a lesson. You know, it'll teach you a new lesson that you never really thought of. And I always found that to be kind of interesting, because I'm like, oh, I wonder, like, what kind of lessons do you learn? Like, if you've been painting for a long time, like, how could you possibly be learning more lessons? And his whole philosophy was that every painting that you do is a different painting, because they all have different problems. And you'll notice, like, what I'm mainly focusing on here is just editing and shape design. That's all I'm doing. You know, I'm not focused on anything else. I'm not focused on putting in a dragon or anything like that. You know, I just want to make sure that everything that I'm putting in here makes sense and it reads really well. And eventually, when you start to get more detailed, this is where you can start to go in and break in more of the textures here, and this is where you can take it to a much more of a somewhat of a finish. And you start to pick an area like here, and you finish this area. Okay, you pick a focal point and you let that focal point be your final. You know, so you want to take it even further. Look at the shapes here, and kind of break up those shapes into smaller shapes. The mixer brush can be used for both your painting or the painting up here. So here's, if I'm going to pick here, this area, and I'm going to put it onto my own painting, or if I want to click on my own painting to mix colors around, I'll do that too. You see? So here's something that I wanted to show you guys. Once you get up to a point, you can actually do something like this. Let me see here. Let me make sure this is all clear. Okay, so here's another demo I did. And what you can do is, when you start off with something like this, I have basically I start off with my just kind of like my overall horizon, and I start putting in my shapes right here, and then from here I start to apply just some of the horizon clouds. Okay, I actually ended up cropping it out, but what I do here is I start to add in, just refine and add in some of these details, and then I start to add in a little bit more texture. This is going to be my focal area. So this is where I'm going to add a lot of detail, but I'm going to have the viewer look up here, but the most amount of detail is going to be here in the ground plane. And that's kind of like where you see me adding a lot more brush strokes. So it kind of started off like this, like this, like this, and then it builds up here. You see? And then I added in a giant here. And then from here, then I created another layer, and this is where I did the mixer brush. If you look here, look down in this area. This is all mixer brush. And then I added some textures here and textures down here to kind of provide more detail. And I darkened this area a little bit and just a little bit more texture. But that's basically how I went from, yeah, that's how I basically started this one off. And this is, I would consider this just to be a sketch too. It's not anything super final. But that's the same process here. Notice how I'm adding in the same shapes, but as the shapes get more complex, then you start to develop, you know, a lot more information. And if you want to add later on, if you want to add like, you know, a character, like you have like the person with a stick person. Right? That's kind of what you can later on do. You see that? And then you can start to add story. Maybe there's like a ship or something far away. So the clone stamp tool is right here. Where is it here? Where's clone stamp? Clone. Oh, right here. Clone stamp. This is a clone stamp tool. If you do all layers, it basically stamps that, right? You see? This is like basic Photoshop. Mixer brush is basically the same thing, but instead of stamping all the pixels, it stamps an area of color and it smudges it. You see that? If you want to add characters and all that stuff, you can. But that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, this is again, this whole assignment is meant for everybody to kind of get used to the idea of painting more loosely. Try to practice, you know, color picking, looking at photo reference. You know, try to get comfortable doing this, because what I want you guys to do is not struggle with concept and trying to apply this technique. I want you to try to practice this technique with your own with a reference image. when you guys when everyone starts to go work, when you're working for a company or you're working for a movie or anything like that, you're not going to have time to think about color picking and all this stuff, you know. What you have is you're going to have a deadline, and that deadline is very, very quick, you know what I mean. And the art director is not going to care if you color pick. They're going to care if you're doing a good job and if your ideas can be turned into a movie or a game. And I guess my whole thing that I want to teach you guys is I want to teach everybody here how to work smarter, not harder. Actually, what I'm teaching everybody here, this is what Jamie Jones did for about 1 year. He did exactly what I'm showing you guys. Like all of this stuff here, these studies, this is what Jamie Jones, this is what he taught me. You know, he said, hey, do about 100 to 200 of these, and then you'll understand how to do good brush economy, good mark making. So it should be, yeah, this should be pretty, like what I want everybody to get really good at is just understanding how to break down the shapes, because then you'll get really comfortable, you know, just blocking in shapes and color, and or just blocking in shapes with your brush strokes, you know. That's all I really care about. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed this session. Again, please let any of us on our Patreon Foundation know if you guys have any other questions. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of leave it at that, and I will see you guys in the next session. And thanks again for tuning in. Have a good one, guys.